Ever wonder what it really takes to make zero trust work in practice? Welcome to Zero Trust Journey, the podcast that cuts through the noise and dives into real stories and strategies to bring zero trust to life. The cybersecurity world is flooded with buzzwords and vendor hype, but here we focus on what truly matters, practical insights and lessons from those who've walked the path. Each episode is inspired by real experiences, grounded in our research, and enriched by the challenges and triumphs of our guests. If you're ready to grow your skills, deepen your insights, and take actionable steps toward a stronger zero trust strategy, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. The views and opinions expressed on the Zero Trust Journey podcast webcast are solely those of the participants and do not represent the views of their employers or affiliated organizations. This content is provided for educational and informational purposes only. Neither the employers nor any sponsors are liable for actions taken based on the content discussed.
Welcome everyone to another session of Zero Trust Journey. My name is Victor Monga. I am the host and producer of Zero Trust Journey podcast. With me today, I have Razi. For those who don't know Razi, he wrote a book on Zero Trust, a bestseller book going on for Zero Trust. He also helped enterprises to actually build their strategy of Zero Trust and actually execute it. So, Razi, I want to steal your thunder. Give us a quick introduction and we'll jump right into it. What is Zero Trust?
I think you did a pretty good job introducing me. So, hey everyone, I'm Razi Rais. So, I will just jump right into it. I mean, I think when we talk about Zero Trust, it's been like really around for a while. That word, Zero Trust.
Yes.
Honestly speaking, it's literally captured in the world of like vendors, right? So everyone go to RSAs and put your conference in there. I mean, there's no shortage. And I think this year was a little bit exception because of the AI. I think we should talk about that too. But I mean, the reality is that the Zero Trust is basically, the way I think about it now, after spending years on it, it's really a philosophical view in a way, right? Because it doesn't necessarily, it's not a tool. It's not something that you can just buy and put nicely in a data center. It's an approach, right? And at the very core of it, right, it just basically asks you to make sure that everything that you're doing in your organization from the lens of from a zero trust standpoint, who do you trust in your environment and why? I mean that's the essence of it, right? Now, the challenge really with zero trust, I think this is what I learned, when I was authoring the book. I'm talking to, so many, leadership people in enterprises, the area where I work in most of the time, is the concept is like super simple, but when you sit down and have a conversation about it, like how you're going to really plan it and how you're going to roll it out, the things start becoming more concrete, and then you need to it's like a delves in the detail. And I think that's where a lot of challenges comes in. And I think we have to talk about it right away because, I mean, the conversation till maybe 23 were very different after we have this whole new sort of like realization from the market that there's something called the generative AI and business are getting in. So I think I will start from there because that is where there's so much focus right now. And Gen AI really, for me, at the end of the day, right, starts from the data, right? So the arbitrage really for a lot of companies is the proprietary data that they have. And I think zero trust alignment there with protecting the data, so it become more effective for generative AI and doesn't got leaked. All of the key considerations of data protection and security applies pretty much to Gen AI. Maybe modalities are a little bit different. So a lot of conversation I'm having right now around zero trust, like how to make sure there's all those things, right? The key pillars, right? And the key areas like users, identities, devices, and then having continuous monitoring and integrated. Those things are absolutely validated. Nothing really changed on those front. It's just that how you're going to adopt in this new world, right? Where the innovation is now happening. Typically in the enterprise world, it was 2 to 3 years, from starting the conversation to see some, initial ROI. I mean, now, when you talk to leaders in the market, right? They want like, well, what is the rate here? The new innovation will come in few months. So I think there's a lot to capture now in the market, and then
So
making sure that zero trust aligned with that. So whatever your strategy was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I know there's a lot of things came out, a lot of great literature came out. It's just like now aligning that with, and I know this may sound like a relic, but there is still companies who are thinking about how they're going to go and fully roll out cloud.
sure,
Um,
yeah.
and they have other sort of problems. So yeah, I mean, love to drill into.
Yeah, you packed a lot in the first segment already, so I'm gonna peel the onion a little bit. So
Yeah, sure.
let's start with first thing actually, Razi, where when you are working with enterprise customers, when you are consulting, and when you are giving your insights and guidance, the first thing I want to ask, and a lot of our audiences have actually asked us, why are they considering zero trust? Like there's a lot already in an enterprise going on. There's a compliance reason, there's NIST, there's other things that they have to consider. Why do they consider zero trust? So let's answer that, and then again I'll peel for the layer of AI and other things as well.
Yeah, I think it fundamentally goes back to how critical do you feel about assets and services you have. So it usually, I mean, I will tell you this, is it start usually very organic, right? You sit down, you have a conversation. Almost all enterprises have a mandate around compliance, regulation, and then on top of that, making sure things are running smooth. And security, especially in the age of cloud and mobile, is such a catalyst, but at the time it also acts as a double-edged sword, right? So they're really worried about how to do it in a holistic way. I mean, the traditional security doesn't really scale, unfortunately, right? With remote work, I mean, we have a pandemic a few years ago. Everyone is connected. Like used to be predefined set of use cases, and you log those things in, and they're relatively secure, but not really when you scale them to like an n by n matrix, right? Like just everyone is connected now. So I think the real conversation is start from, what can I do to basically make sure that these scenarios are catered towards, and then my existing whatever posture I have, security posture, it doesn't really resonate with that. I think that's organically it goes back to, and I
So would you say
remember.
sorry to interrupt you. Would you say the landscape has changed? Because what we knew, let's say even pre-pandemic, most of the people used to go to their offices, and we had, as you said, predefined set of rules. And so far, I know I'm going to connect my laptop to the work desk, and that's going to go through some firewalls, some policies, some other things that even like allow list of my public IPs and all that. Well, that's not the case anymore, right? Everybody's traveling, everybody's using their phones, iPads to do the best effective and efficient way. And that has changed the game, let's say the landscape. Now the rules have to be changed, and zero trust provides that new rules for the new landscape. Would you say that that's accurate, or would you modify that?
No, I think that's a pretty accurate summation of that. I mean, it's really that. I mean, it's just that we are doing things at a rapid pace. We are doing more of it. There are more things that are connected, and those use cases led to a different requirement from the security that we had like 7 8 years ago. And I think we just saw that during pandemic, right? Where every company were actually become like a sort of like a some part digital, even if they were not, and they need that. And in the absence of that, it's a challenge for them to remain secure. I think honestly speaking, to be fair, there is definitely, like how should I put it, without to be too judgmental or
Or
something.
lipstick, just go for it. Just keep it
Yeah, I
unfiltered.
just feel that we there's no way to sugarcoat, right? Once we have the executive order, there's a lot of momentum, and I think for the right reasons, right? We need to be more secure, but I think at the end of the day, there's a vendor space out there, and there's a natural market dynamics around it, right? So everyone so Junos does great. I think it's got the visibility, but now you have to really do it. And I think that is where fundamentally, right? It's just, I always focus on this. It's not about tooling. I mean, if you don't get basic things in your organization right, it's not going to be like a zero trust will fix those. I give you just one example. In large enterprises, right, engineering may not actually talk to the operations. I mean, there's a lot of talks about DevSecOps and all that, but there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of politics, and zero trust really demand like continuous monitoring, right? How would you do that? Like operations cannot just lick up something and magically, solve your telemetry monitoring from the dev side. Both teams, like leadership, have to rally behind that. And that zero trust may act as an enabler, because I mean you can have a conversation at a higher level and you're investing, so there's a motivation. But then there's a change that is required, that is cultural, and that's what I've seen can be a real headwind, rather than a tailwind. If you have a culture where teams are more agile, they talk to each other, things are like natural, they move very quickly on these things, because you need to have a conversation with someone. Hey, you have a shadow IT here. We need to know what's going on with your assets. I mean, how would you do continuous monitoring? How would you do, always verify adaptive MFA if you don't really know what assets are out there? So there's some hard conversations, right? And I think that's really where the challenge is. It's really not just zero trust because, hey, we need to, want you to go and buy the latest, laptop with a best TPM. It's really,
Sure.
Yeah. someone need to be motivated enough to say, yeah, I'm going to work with you. This is just the classic thing in enterprise.
Yeah, Razi, in your book, you gave some insights on how to get started and how to actually, like, if someone is considering to go to Zero Trust, if there's leaders out there who are listening to this podcast, can you give us that summary of what you wrote? And obviously, we encourage everybody to pick up your book as well. But just a quick summary on how to get started, how to get buy-ins, because that's not something that it comes to natural, right? So as a security leader, maybe you have relationships. Exactly what you said. You got to bridge the gap now between two different teams. Maybe something that you haven't considered in the past, but reading your book, it gave me insights. Would you like to summarize that for our audience so that they can get insights and maybe pick up your book as well?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do is, and I think if you look at the book, it's vendor agnostic. So we choose that, and that's something intentional in all the versions, first version and the second version. And also there is, I mean, the book is for people who have some technical background, but doesn't need to be really like a deep dive into networking or identity or devices for that matter.
Sure.
I think somebody's starting up, I would say that first look at your own motivation, like why you're interested. I mean, if you just wanted to ramp up, you do need to understand the basic pillars of zero trust, right? We talk about what is different today that will demand zero trust. So the first few chapters actually talks about that. Just basic, like why we need that, right? Why you wanted to go in and basically assume that there's no trust. So now that assumption will dictate how you're going to behave on every single query that's coming in. So that require a little bit more of thinking in different ways than just, firewall rules are coming from network. If you're more like an app dev, you say, well, I'm going to do a sandbox. It's just a little bit more holistic thinking. So the book sort of like goes from that journey, right? It talks about where we are, what's changed, and where you need to be. And then I think that's where the interesting point is, that then you pivot into the verticals. So there are few areas where I think you need to be knowledgeable. And, a lot of times people individually may have interest in maybe all of them, but in terms of the depth, they may have one or two at max. I mean, usually people spend their day job on few of the things, right? So people who are more into the networking, they usually don't go and do maybe app development, right? The data security is slightly different from infrastructure. The book basically help you go through all of those without no assumption that you have any background in networking or identity or devices. Sort of like gives you that overview and then go just deep enough. I mean, it's a technical, you require some level of technical depth to read it, but it's not written as if that you have to be an expert. And it's also definitely not academic style, right? Okay, so this is the pillar one, pillar two. We just go through naturally and then sort of like talks about some of the, how you bring it all together, what are the challenges today?
I thoroughly enjoy it. I think one thing maybe you can also enlighten, where now that I have started my journey and I'm going to Zero Trust, okay, it's an endless journey. It's not something that you can have as a project and towards the end of it, now you have achieved Zero Trust. That's not a thing. But as I'm going through it, what are the common challenges that you have seen after talking to the customers? What are the common challenges that they have faced that you can probably let in our audience and they could probably avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, that is that's such interesting, and I think that's a pretty spot on question. I think the first thing you should do, honestly, and any leader should do is think realistically, like what do you want it to achieve? What outcome that you want to drive? Not just on the security side, but overall. I mean, it's an investment. So the thing is that, again, at the end of the day, I like to think about like from a risk management standpoint, like what risk you are going to tolerate, when you look at the existing landscape of security in your organization, right? The zero trust, the challenge really is a both cultural and technical aspects of it when you roll it out. For example, do you really know what technical debt you have today? If zero trust asks you to do adopt MFA and you don't really have the tools to do that, then that's sort of like you have to invest in there. If teams will talk to each other and you wanted to have there's going to be a lot of requirement where, as I said initially, like N by M, right? So identity, devices, application, network, monitoring, everything need to be connected together. What is your appetite look like? And sometimes I feel there's a initial motivation, but when you sit down and have a conversation realistically, and it comes down to, so what are those risks that we are ready to take? And what are the risks that we just don't necessarily prioritize them the same way we thought initially? Because it will ask you, it will really demand you, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's why I really believe that maturity models, right, are important in large enterprises because of the way they behave, right? Because of the way they operate. So that's the number one challenge I feel like on the day one when you sit down and have a conversation. There's a perception that what zero trust is and what they can bring, and then when you sit down and have a reality check, I think that's sort of like, I mean, again, I give it, without any sugarcoating, and the last like maybe 18 months to 24 months is just that now you have a zero trust conversations, but now we have this rampant, like the changing world of AI. And if you bring, let's say some sort of like a LLM in your organization, and there's a whole new conversation around like, okay, what are the threats here? Is there data leakage here? I mean, it's not deterministic. Like if you ask any LLM a question, I mean, it doesn't give you the exact same answer to the same question. So it's not deterministic in the traditional sense. Your basic security and tooling doesn't necessarily respond to it in the same way. Plus, I mean, there are some other threats, not just like a LLM. I mean, there's a deepfake and all that. So now the conversation is even more challenging because this domain changed very rapidly. So when I sit down and have a conversation, whatever came in the last like month or so, or whatever top of mind of that executive, they will bring it up. And then you need to make sure that zero trust story aligned with that. It's, I don't know how they're going to eventually resonate with it, but it is the fact that zero trust, is really, as I say, like it's an approach. So the more you're going to work with it, the better it becomes, and AI will be part of it. But it's not going to be like just deploy this and then AI security now become part of it. It's going to be back and forth for a while before we see the patterns over there. I think that's another area because, I mean, we have a RSA, right? And that was the topic, like the AI security and the challenges.
So let's double click on that one, Razi, actually. So zero trust, let's say someone started their journey around 2018, 19. They were maturing. They were trying to get better at zero trust. They are, again, doing their best. Now AI comes in. And as you said, it's a data problem. What goes in, what comes out, and how I'm using zero trust. Do you think that strategy has to be changed, or is it something as simple as that? Now it needs to be factored in, just like as an endpoint, just like a network, just like your data. Now Gen AI, LLM, AI, it has to be all factored in as part of your zero trust strategy, or does it change the strategy altogether that you have to start from the beginning?
I think you can pivot. I mean, I feel that at the core of it, a lot of it is going to be driven by the data security. I mean, fundamentally, Gen AI, at least to a point, right, is garbage in, garbage out. If you give it a data which is garbage, emit the garbage out. I mean, I'm talking about specifically the enterprise use cases where they will be bringing their own data, they train it. So now the question really is what guardrails you can put on the data, right? When you interact with it, you don't want it to hallucinate, to deceive you, not doing it intentionally, but that can happen. Now, think about zero trust, right? You're going to be interacting with this system. It's highly undeterministic. It has a domain defined, but it's undeterministic. Plus, it can give you a feedback which may not be correct. So now if you're using that information and then there are, prompt injection and things like that, that can be used to basically, from a adversarial standpoint. So I think you need to factor those things in. The question really is that nobody really knows what's coming. I mean, up until last year, the LLMs, now is agentic, that will bring a completely different domain. Like, so you would have so many identities. How would you scale? How would you manage? And then zero trust, like, absolutely applies over there. At that scale, it's like almost sounds unprecedented. So you have to factor those things in. And I think at least my opinion is companies who will be successful with securing around these areas will go back to the fundamentals, right? They will sit down and decide how the data security is going to be, how I'm going to make sure that lateral movement not going to happen in this environment with definitely zero trust policy. It's going to be just more of those things. As I said, right, the rate of change moved from like 2 to 3 year enterprises, like now quarterly, you have some like serious innovation coming in. So it's a challenge and it's also rewarding.
Yeah, we hear the same as well, Razi, when we talk to our participants, where why zero trust and how zero trust is changing a culture. And this is where we hear consistently the same story, where it's forcing us to sit down, look at the back to the fundamentals, back to basics, where why are we doing things the way we are? Is it on the name of just because that's how it has been? Or was there an actual reason? And does that reason still factor in with today's, again, change of landscape and threats and everything? As we're wrapping up, let's end with this. If you were to give an advice to someone who is starting their zero trust journey, what are the 3 things that you would tell them? Like, look at these things and make sure you don't actually skip them, or you don't cut the corners. Like, what are the 3 things fundamentally that they need to start if they're considering zero trust?
Interesting. I would say that the first thing would be the actual. So there are 3 things, right? One is why you want zero trust. Like, what exactly driving you? Be honest with yourself. And this can be business / whatever domain you're in, depending on your, rank and file. Be very specific what you want from zero trust. I mean, even before you get in, this outcome should not be based on this is zero trust bucket, I'm going to put it in and then it will solve the problem, right? So be very clear about it. Now, zero trust itself, right? It's a big area. So I think you need to understand the fundamentals. I would say that personally, the NIST architecture guide document is like under 30 pages. I think you should basically go and read it cover to cover. And if you feel comfortable with it, then that should give you enough ammunition to get it started and give you an approach, right? You can, of course, pick the book that I authored, but
And I said that should be your first recommendation. I'm surprised, actually. So I thought you were going to say, pick my book, and it covers some of it.
But I mean, let's be honest, just like we're too dense. But then you go into a little bit more down the weeds. When I think the book comes into the picture, then I feel that depending on what lens you want to put in, if you're more into technical side of the things, there's a lot going on in almost each area of technology in zero trust, like be it identity, be it networking, data. There's no shortage of that. So be focused. I mean, if you really wanted to go down into the weeds, and maybe start with your area of strength. I genuinely enjoy having conversations with people who have no knowledge of zero trust in terms of the domain, but they're bringing in that wealth of knowledge, right, that they're already working on. Somebody's a app developer, right, or just a software engineer, right? They can bring a lot of value in. So what I would say do not do for sure is try to be master all. I mean, it's just no one, like, I know you can definitely go deeper into more than one domain, but there are always going to be cases where you'll be humbled, right? When you look at it, that, oh my God, I mean, this is something pretty unique to this domain. I didn't talk about it. So I think the success of zero trust, as an individual, if you try to look into it, really comes from like understand the basic fundamental to a point where you understand why it matters and how it's different, and then probably go into the domain where you either want to grow or you're coming from.
Very wise, yeah. And I think that's partly where, again, we always blame the market and we blame the vendors that they have created the buzz. At the same time, if you're really serious about it, then you should understand what zero trust is, and maybe it's not relevant to you if that's what the conclusion you come up with, right? Have you seen any cases or examples where they have thoroughly actually understood zero trust and they're like, yeah, this is not for my company. This doesn't work for me or I don't need it. Have you seen these examples?
I definitely seen variations of that, right? Like either too motivated and the maturity was not there as an organization, and the desire was to reap the benefit, and then you don't necessarily have either the resources or motivation to walk that. I think, as I said, right, that's really where organizations struggle a lot. Like how much time it will take for the zero trust initiative to start producing like sort of like the ROI,
Sure.
because there is a price tag on it. And I think the sooner you understand that, the better it is, because smaller teams usually can have a very fast turnaround just by the nature of the, how they are. But in large organizations, I think they try something, it didn't work out, the desire to go back and, try something new. Again, usually the things move very slowly. So I think the sort of like what I see actually quite a pattern is, if you say to someone that, this is not a checklist, you cannot give them the checklist. What you can give them is sort of like a directional guidance. Like, okay, with this thing, this is where you want to be. And then at each level of maturity, you can grow. And again, that probably helped them. But
Sure.
if you just go in with that, like, I wanted to just, deploy this and then want to get done with it, it's usually doesn't work very well.
Yeah, we had an interesting case where we have seen one case where it's the organization is saying we have enough maturity that we don't need to even consider zero trust. We are good from compliance perspective, from technical security perspective. We have everything what zero trust says, so we have zero trust. We don't need to actually follow the path of zero trust. So I was just wondering if you have seen those cases or if you have seen those examples.
Yeah, I've seen companies who are pretty content with where they are in terms of their metric of security. Like I have, in healthcare sectors, right? There's some customers I talk to, and they move at their own pace, and their belief is that we are compliant, we are at a certain level of maturity with our security practice, and we will adopt a little bit here, a little bit there, but we are not necessarily wanted to look at it holistically, because we are content, right? And whether this is the number, but they have their own metrics, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it's not everything is for everyone, right? So it's just that I think it's useful in majority of the cases, but maybe your organization in a specific niche area, right? And then I think one area where I feel is extremely challenging is the operational technology, OT, because OT by design is very different from the regular way of doing things in IT. And that's where I think, zero trust is a very, implementing it is quite a challenge.
Yeah, fair. All right, Razi. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening to us. Again, for all the past shows and future announcements, you can go to ztjourney.com or you can go to our LinkedIn page, ZT or Zero Trust Journey. Razi, once again, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on Zero Trust Journey. If this episode sparked new ideas or gave you practical insights, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your network. Your support helps us continue bringing you valuable conversations and real-world stories. We'd love to hear from you. Share your feedback or even your own zero trust journey by reaching out to us. Your story could inspire others in the community. Stay tuned for more expert insights, compelling stories, and actionable advice to help you advance your zero trust strategy. Until next time, stay curious and keep making progress on your zero trust journey. See you in the next episode.